But then I had to be the one to call my parents and call my siblings to tell them that my brother Andy was dead. My
Yeah,
mom
that's
picks up
tough.
the phone, and the first words out of her mouth is, "What's wrong? Is Andy dead?"
Mm,
For her to not even ask,
you
"How's
knew.
it going? What's going on with you?" To have that
Mm.
come out just shows what are individuals walking around with on a daily basis. While they may be trying to, work on their own relationships, work in their jobs, whatever, but always having that dialogue. When am I going to get that call? When am I going to get that call? When am I going to get that call? It will make you sick. And that's why it's a family dynamic and not an individual dynamic, and why you can't just send your loved one away and hoping everyone's going to get well. It's impacted you in different ways. It's changed you. You need to do your work too.
Yeah, that's. You're listening to When God Intervenes, the podcast where faith, hope, and healing come together for families with a loved one battling addiction. I'm here with Doug Dolan with Recovery in the Pines in Arizona, and I'm going to just let Doug tell you a little bit about himself to begin with, and how he got into the line of work that he's in, and then we'll just go from there. All right, Doug.
Well, Daryl, thank you very much for having me and giving me the opportunity to, share a little bit about my story, and hopefully it's helpful for other people who are struggling out there. So I'm in recovery. I've been sober since April 19th of 1997. So I'm coming up on 27 years, God bless. And my issue was predominantly blackout binge drinking from alcohol, but I did smoke a lot of marijuana for a period of time. And then I also got into some other substances, but it was mainly blackout binge drinking. And so fortunately, I got sober. I was working in the tech sector. And so I ended up doing really well in the tech sector. I was a VP for a technology company out in Southern California. And then I moved my family to this little Mayberry town of Prescott, Arizona. And originally, I owned a fine dining restaurant. I've done a variety of things in my background, but I ended up meeting Albert Black and Karen Black, who are my partners today in Recovery in the Pines. And it was really their vision. And they shared their vision with me. And at that time, I had a copywriting and editing business. But because recovery is so close to me, and unfortunately, I lost a younger brother in March of '08 to a drug overdose. So I have that experience in my family of seeing one who made the sacrifice to go get well, and one who unfortunately made the ultimate sacrifice because they wanted to try to do it on their own. And so those are some of the guiding, whys for me of why I do this. And so I was blessed to meet Albert and Karen back in it was like '09, 2010. And Albert and Karen shared their vision as far as what they were thinking about as far as launching the program Recovery in the Pines. And so I said, like, hey, I would love to be a part of that. And it just immediately rung true for me of, the things that I had been doing before were career or job oriented, and this is a calling. And
Yeah.
so we launched Recovery in the Pines in April of 2012. So we're now in our 12th year. And since that time, we originally started as a long-term Christian 12-step based treatment facility. And when I say long-term, most of our clients we engage for 1 year. And so there's a lot of 30-day options out there. That's
Mhm.
what most people are accustomed to going through. Unfortunately, it's not enough. Like the national averages for who stays sober just completing a 30-day program is less than 10%. And those are horrible odds when you take into consideration that you're not just gambling with a relapse. For some people, you're gambling with a relapse also leads to a loss of a relationship, a divorce. It could be a loss of a job, loss of income, loss of health, loss of freedom, because then there's legal issues. And in some cases, like my brother, loss of life. So why take the gamble being in a hurry that this could go horribly wrong? And so we just come at things from a very different standpoint. We focus on the clinical aspect in dealing with dual diagnoses issues. So we're dealing with substance abuse issues, we're dealing with mental health issues, and some clients come to us just on pure mental health. They don't all necessarily have a substance abuse issue. We get into health and wellness. So that's both from our medical team, assessing what might physically be going on with an individual. How do we properly diagnose and manage medication in a healthy way? Because we've seen way too many people misdiagnosed, over-medicated, and those sorts of issues. But it's also getting into proper sleep, proper nutrition, proper hydration, and exercise. We exercise on a pretty much daily basis. Our health and wellness director is a talented individual. He was a former special ops guy in the Air Force as a combat controller. And he's also a certified strength and conditioning specialist, and just does a great job in combining with the input from the medical team. What do we need to do to create individualized exercise programs for each individual? Because we see a wide spectrum of individuals in age, in how healthy they are. We've had anywhere from 18-year-olds to people up in their 70s. We've had world-class athletes to other people who are coming to us after car accidents and things of that nature. So we see all these things. But as we know, it's healthy for somebody to get up and move, but in healthy ways, so you can continue to make progress. That's good for their mental health. It's good for their physical health, right? And so that's important to us. And then we are a Christian-based program, but you do not need to be Christian to come to our program. And we don't beat people up with the Bible or shove it down their throat, but let's open up this book. Let's have a discussion of what's in here. Is there wise, helpful information for you? And then the last aspect, which is a huge component for us, is life skills. Just getting somebody to stop doing what they were doing before doesn't mean they know how to live. And so we've got to work through all those issues, and we have an extensive curriculum around life skills, which could be very practical things, or they could be more things around like, how do I deal with overwhelm? How do I deal with anger? How do I deal with fear? What are some of these self-sabotaging thinking habits that I have, and how do I need to work through these? And these are not just lessons for people in recovery. These are lessons for life of things as we as human beings struggle with. So we're trying to give the individual a healthy opportunity to make a healthy transition back into life and really have some healthy skills that they can put into practice.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up about the longer term treatment, because that's something I've been telling parents for years. Like, this problem didn't happen overnight. You're not going to be able to correct the problem overnight. It's going to take some time.
Yes.
And I think you pretty much covered it all as to why they need, why do they need 12 months at least?
Well, actually, could I add something to
Yeah,
that?
go ahead. Go right ahead.
Let's look at something that's really now starting to emerge, which is cannabis-induced psychoses. Some people aren't coming out of psychoses for 30 days. So if they just do a 30-day program, they're now just out of psychoses. They haven't been able to really start any of the work, and then they go back into their home environment. They've learned nothing new. They fall back into old patterns. Their chances for success are horrible. Some aren't even out of psychoses in 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
So some of that's just going to take time. Then, depending upon how much trauma you might have from the past, you don't deal with all things of trauma inside of 30 days.
That's right.
Then you also have to learn a whole new way of living, new patterns, new habits, new ways of thinking, new life skills. That doesn't just happen inside of 30 days. You can't jam all of that into somebody inside of 30 days and think that they're going to be a master at it.
That's right.
Out on the other side, again, with some pretty weighty things of what you need to deal with in the real world.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and by the way, people go back to work or back to school while in our program, unless they're a retiree or they have something else. And so you got to start integrating them into life, which is when somebody goes and does a 30-day program, it's as if I put my life on hold, so I go do recovery. We do recovery and life. And so it is them moving forward with their life. It is not their life on hold.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really important. You mentioned the cannabis-induced psychosis, and I have run across that a lot. I've run across it more in recent years.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's a correlation there with the increase in potency.
absolutely.
Another thing I'm hearing a lot of is the Delta 8. I've heard a lot about in recent months, and the psychosis related to Delta 8. And also a couple of times just recently, the nitrous oxide has come up.
That's one of the things I used to do a lot of as well. So let's go to the nitrous oxide first, if you don't mind, and then go
Okay.
back to the cannabis-induced psychoses. So one of the things about nitrous oxide, I did a lot of nitrous oxide for a period of time. And one of the reasons, by the way, I sit on a number of committees. One of the committees I sit on here in Yavapai County is I sit on a committee to review all the overdose fatalities for Yavapai County. And so we look at the toxicology reports. We do interviews with family or whoever is, supportive for that individual to see, did they have, trauma from childhood? Did they have other mental health diagnoses? Did they have access to treatment? Were they successful in it? Did they avoid it? Were there other legal issues? Like, we're looking at a number of factors. We're not just looking at what the medical examiner provides as far as, let's say, a toxicology report. We're looking at the whole individual, and some of the deaths that we've reviewed are just purely based upon huffing, which is really what nitrous oxide is. You're just huffing this gas for a quick, immediate high. It's very damaging. One of the reasons why individuals do it is because if they are in a program or if they're under court order or some kind of, let's say, restriction from family where they know they're going to be drug tested, hey, it's a great way for them to, hey, can I get that high without getting caught?
That's
Here's
right.
the damaging part of it. I have a client that came through my program a couple of years ago, and this individual was doing extensive huffing with nitrous oxide, so much so that he had to go to another rehabilitation program, but physical rehabilitation program, just to learn how to walk again. And so it's just very
Wow.
damaging to the brain. So,
Mhm.
we have to watch where are people doing it with nitrous oxide. They can do inhalants of other kinds, gasoline, acetones,
Mm.
desktop computer cleaner, those sorts of things. So
Mhm.
for any family members, you want to pay attention to, hey, why do they have a lot of cans of dust off? Or why does it seem like there's a lot of either whipped cream canisters or other things
Right.
that, like, pay attention to the signs, right?
Mhm.
To go back to the cannabis-induced psychoses. So I'm 53 years old. I started smoking marijuana in 1985. And in 1985, we pretty much only had the flower form of marijuana, of what we were
Mm.
smoking back then, and the THC concentration was maybe 2 to 4%.
Yeah.
What's engineered in the leaf form today is in the 17 to 20% range. So you have a significantly higher potency there. But then we have the proliferation of all these different other kinds of THC products, which can be edibles, they can be waxes, dabs, shatters, and also the liquid form of THC that a
Mhm.
lot of people smoke in vapes, which part they do it because it doesn't have that, common smell to it. But the potency in some of the liquid form of THC can be anywhere in the 60 to 90 plus range. So part of the damage is individuals of my age who used to smoke it, let's say back in the 70s or 80s, telling people it's not that bad. And it's like, well, it wasn't as bad what you used to smoke, but that's like you used to drink light beer and the kids are drinking grain alcohol on a consistent basis today. Like, the potency of it is just in a whole different realm. So that's one of the issues of why we're seeing it. And then obviously the legalization and then the socialization and how it's promoted and those sorts of things are all another factor. And with how many people, I've seen this where how many people have kind of used a medicinal marijuana card as a catch-all for all issues. Hey, I have this anxiety, I have this pain, I have this itch, I have, and assuming, thinking, or hoping I can just smoke some THC products or some other kind of ingest some kind of other THC product, and it's going to solve all these problems for me. And unfortunately, more and more, we are seeing issues of psychoses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm definitely hearing a lot more about it. Anything else that you've been seeing lately? Like I know that the fentanyl has been a big issue for a while.
Yes.
Anything else along those lines?
Yeah, one of the things that we're seeing that's coming more on the scene because the cartels are always looking for new ways to pipe drugs into the United States. And then, what is the new variety type of product that an individual can use? Because as you use a product, by the way, you develop a tolerance for it. And so it loses its potency. And so you're either using more, or you're looking for the new thing, right? And so one
Mm,
of the things that's come out is mixing fentanyl with xylazine. And xylazine is a tranquilizer. And here's the danger in that, which is you can use Narcan to arrest the overdose effects of fentanyl, but it won't do anything for the xylazine, and the individual can still overdose and die. And so there's just other things like that that are emerging in the market. Fentanyl is still the primary one of what's out there and what we're seeing, how it's mixed in a wide variety of different products. And people will often ask me, well, why would the drug dealers do that? Why kill off potentially your clientele? And there's a couple of reasons why fentanyl has been like co-mixed with a variety of products. First off, by the way, the drug dealers really don't care. It's about the money. It's not about the individual,
yeah.
right? And unfortunately, business is booming. And
Hmm.
so I also was selected as one of 12 people back in October of 22 in Northern Arizona to do some training with the DEA. So I got to see firsthand information about, like, they showed us videos of raids that they had done on mountaintop labs in central Mexico to the Sinaloa cartel. And these are not like labs that we would expect to see here in the United States under, clean conditions and all these controls. This is just out in the mountains, out in the jungle, and there's just bins and vats and things of that nature. So sometimes it's just on a pure cross-contamination basis because they're
Hmm.
working with a variety of products and they may use some of these instruments on fentanyl, and then they happen to use it to process cocaine or some other product, and they just have cross-contamination. So
Hmm.
that's one
Hmm.
issue. The second issue is, again, if we go back to cocaine, because we've seen some reemergence with cocaine, is if you have drug dealer A who is just using, let's say, pure cocaine, or it might be cut with some other products, and drug dealer B also peddling cocaine, but it has fentanyl in it, what they're hoping for is it gets you addicted to their product that much faster. So they're just trying to draw you back to their particular product. And so that's one of the reasons. And there's also, luckily, more and more naloxone has been readily available, or people may have heard it in the name Narcan as a way to arrest overdose effects from opioids. So drug dealers and drug users are taking the risk of going and using products which they could overdose on and hoping that they can be revived.
Mm. Wow.
One of the other alarming trends relative to that, by the way, is although fentanyl has been around since 1960, we really didn't see it emerging with clients until about 7 or 8 years ago. And 7 or 8 years ago, if somebody OD'd on fentanyl one time, an individual's like, I need to get into a program, I might die. Now we've seen people who just aren't scared of it anymore.
Wow.
Some just more casual saying, hey, I've overdosed 5 times, I've
Hmm.
overdosed 10 times. And so kind of losing that fear in essence, that's an alarming trend as well.
Mm. That is alarming. Oh, what about cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think a lot of parents maybe have a child who's suffering from that, but they don't know what's going on yet. They don't know what it is.
Yeah. And so what you'll see is GI distress from your loved one. It'll be hard for them to eat. They'll throw up more frequently. They'll take long, hot showers. And what some family members go to because they don't know, let's say maybe that their loved one is using some kind of THC or cannabis product, that they think, well, do they have celiac disease? Do they have irritable bowel syndrome? Are they gluten intolerant? And so they'll try all these other things, and it's like, it's frustrating. Why isn't this working? When they
Mhm.
don't realize they may be using THC products that's really at the root of this. So you'll see your loved one again, they'll be nauseous, it'll be harder for them to eat. They will vomit more frequently, or they'll spend a lot of time in the bathroom. They'll take long, hot showers because that has a certain soothing effect. And
Mhm.
so it's just watching for what those different signs are and do a drug test on them. See if they're coming up and they're popping positive for THC. There is the potential that that's what they're actually dealing with.
What kind of advice would you have for parents around setting boundaries? Let's just say they have a son or daughter who is they've just realized
Yep.
that they have a problem
Hmm.
uh, around drugs or alcohol or both,
Yes.
and they're kind of in panic mode right now.
Sure.
What would you tell them?
Well, I think, one is to take a look at there can be a fine line for people between being empathetic and being enabling. Okay. So, hey, this is your child. You have empathy for them. You may see them struggling, having issues. You're not initially sure why, and you want to do your best for your loved one. You approach them with empathy, with compassion, and that sort of thing. But when you start to realize, oh, hey, they're struggling with substance use, and realize if you're coming to the awareness of them, using alcohol or other drugs, let's say, you're only seeing a portion of it. You're never seeing the whole story. So you can automatically assume it's already worse than what you think that it is.
Yeah,
So where it crosses over from empathy to enabling is I ask two things of people. One is take ownership for yourself, and two, get into healthy action to the best of your ability. And so when somebody decides, like, well, no, I'm not taking ownership for my life, somebody else has to clean up the consequences for me, or I just can't help it, I have to use these products as a way to self-soothe. It's like, that's not accurate. Or if they're not willing to, hey, we need to make some changes. I need you to stop using these products, but let's engage you into other healthy things, whether it's sports, school, music, whatever it may be. If they choose not to do that, your empathy can become enabling if you as a parent is basically cleaning up the consequences behind them.
yeah,
Whether you're paying bills for them, they're getting in trouble with the law and you're trying to, manage that for them. If you're lying for your loved one on any kind of basis because of guilt or shame or things of that nature, what you have to watch is one is you're keeping them sick and you're making yourself sick as you enable them. Okay.
yeah,
And that enabling, because what the reason why most of us enable is we're hoping we can control the outcome for what we want. Like if I help you for this period of time, I'm hoping you get back on course and you go do the right thing. The
hmm,
problem is most you give them an inch, they take a mile, and things only get worse. And so what ends up happening is as you're enabling, you're creating the opportunity for them to get sicker. And sometimes the enabling for the individual, that empathy and that compassion can turn into anger. It can turn into resentment. It can turn into frustration. Or in some cases for individuals, it just turns into apathy. Like, fine, I just don't care anymore. And
hmm,
none of that's well. So what do you do? Well, one is, hey, I need you to take ownership for the fact of you're responsible for choosing your choices, and I need you to get into healthy action to start making healthier choices. You can do these things. If they choose to, God bless. Lean in and support them with empathy and compassion. If not, you have to start detaching with love. I have to start putting up some boundaries. No, I am not going to pay those bills for you. No, I'm not going to clean up those messes for you. Yes, I am going to introduce you to some professional help of where you can get some help because you are not making the healthy choices for yourself. So watch having your empathy become enabling. And that can just be very destructive for the whole family, not just for the individual.
Yeah, that's true. That's very, very true. It's hard on relationships with everybody in the family. It just puts a
Absolutely.
big strain there for sure.
Well, and I've witnessed it firsthand because, as I mentioned earlier, I knew on some level the impact that my binge drinking had on my parents, even though I didn't live with them. I lived in Southern California. They lived in upstate New York. Like we were on opposite sides of the United States, but they were aware of some of the things that was going on with me. And so I saw that impact, but I also really saw it as my brother deteriorated and unfortunately passed away.
Mm.
That I saw firsthand what that does to a dynamic. So much so, by the way, is I saw my brother 30 days before he overdosed and died, and I told him exactly what was going to happen.
Mm.
And fortunately, I asked him, just say two words, Andy, please help. Just say those two words. I'll make sure you get all the help that you need. And he's decided, nope, I need to do this on my own. And then 30 days later, I got the call from his wife in terror as he was either dead or dying on the couch before first responders even showed up. And so that's an extremely frustrating experience, terrifying experience, right?
Mm.
And
Mm.
what that does to a loved one. But then I had to be the one to call my parents and call my siblings to tell them that my brother Andy was dead. My
Yeah,
mom
that's
picks up
tough.
the phone, and the first words out of her mouth is, "What's wrong? Is Andy dead?"
Mm.
For her to not even ask,
You
"How's
knew.
it going? What's going on with you?" To have that
Mm.
come out just shows what are individuals walking around with on a daily basis while they may be trying to, work on their own relationships, work in their jobs, whatever, but always having that dialogue. When am I going to get that call? When am I going to get that call? When am I going to get that call? It will make you sick. And that's why it's a family dynamic and not an individual dynamic, and why you can't just send your loved one away and hoping everyone's going to get well. It's impacted you in different ways. It's changed you. You need to do your work too.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's one thing you and I sort of have in common in that for me, it was a son, for you, it was a brother, but we both
Yes.
have that loss.
Yes.
And I'm sure for you, I mean, I can speak for myself. I know that it has changed me. You
Absolutely.
know, I've been able to use that to create positive change in myself. The pain associated with all of that, and I'm sure you have had a similar experience.
Well, we hope that we mature through the damage of these things. We don't just mature with the passing of years,
Right.
meaning, hey, how do we mature with this relationship of this sense of loss, this grief, and maybe trauma? Like time doesn't make trauma better, time can make trauma worse, right? And
Yeah,
so,
that's
what do
right.
we do to get to work on us? And as we heal, some of us, feel called to give back and help others who are
Yeah.
struggling through this, right? Which we then can take these tragic events and go and use them in the benefits of others,
Yeah.
which is part of why I do what I do.
Yeah.
One, having gone down that path. Two, having witnessed the loss of a loved one, I have both those dynamics to be able to understand both those roles of what that's like. And so for me, it's just shame on me if I don't go back in and help potentially lead others out from that darkness.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where I am too. And parents who have a child battling addiction are already grieving in a sense. They're grieving the
Correct.
loss of the child that they knew.
Yes.
And then they have that what I call anticipatory grief, where they're
Yes.
always on pins and needles, wondering when they're going to get that phone call. And so they really need to refocus on their own life. And I know that's hard to do, but that's where they need some help.
Yes.
And that's part of what I do is help them. They're dealing with emotions, learning how to manage those emotions. People like you and I have been through that before, and we've had
Yes.
to learn how to, through the pain, how do you manage those emotions? Can you speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, as you were talking about that, I pictured, did you ever see the movie A Perfect Storm? with George Clooney, Mark
Yes.
Wahlberg, the true
Yes.
story of the Gloucester fishermen who
Yeah.
go out, far to try to catch this load, but they get caught in this storm, right?
Great movie. Yeah.
Yep. And so part of it is like being caught in that storm and feeling like, hey, should we still plot forward or do we need to turn back? Right. And
That's
there's a
great.
scene where the sky parts. You get that hope. I see the sun coming in without necessarily realizing, oh, you're just in the center of the storm right now. Right. So you can be hopeless, but then you see sometimes your loved one does some things right and you get that hope and you hope they can become who you know that they could become, but you could still be right in the middle of the storm. And so it's having guidance from somebody who has been through those storms to help you navigate those rough seas and say, here's what you need to do that is healthiest for you. Because also picture it's almost like having your loved one drowning and now you want to rescue them. Well, often if somebody is in a moment of crisis and they're in a frantic mode, often what's the worst thing you can do to try to help that drowning person is swim up on them and grab a hold of them because you're trying to rescue them and they end up beating up the rescuer and the rescuer drowns. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
you try to throw them a lifeline and you hope they grab a hold of that lifeline. And if they do, God bless, reel them in. But some say, no, I don't want that lifeline. I want it to look different. You need to give me this. And they start to try to negotiate with you. Don't negotiate with the unwell because it will only terrorize you.
Yeah.
Have to set a course of action of where I need help. I don't know how to navigate these rough seas. I need the rescue swimmers in my life who have been trained, who have been through this before, that can help me navigate this. And hopefully we have the opportunity for my loved one to get well, but it is a choice in essence for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, Doug, do you have anything else you want to add to wrap this up?
Yeah, what I think I would say is, as you know, this work is really dealing with insanity. Whether it is the insanity of what ensues from extensive usage or the other mental health issues, people aren't raised to know how to work with those issues. And I kind of liken it in a way of if you had, let's say, a Down syndrome or autistic child. Like most of us aren't raised to know, hey, how do we engage an individual who has Down syndrome who has autism? How do we engage them in healthy ways? Right? Like you don't learn it until you have to. And you learn it, hopefully not just kind of fumbling through it on your own, which there is some of that, but go seek out the help and don't with guilt or shame think we have to be able to manage this on our own. Like you're in uncharted waters and stormy seas of where you've never been before. I wouldn't go venture out on your own. I would just go seek help. Now, you just need to then know, how do I separate out good help from, what might not be the greatest of help? And just be prepared that if it doesn't include some kind of a holistic approach, looking at your loved one mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, socially, if it doesn't include transitioning them not only from stopping and arresting what was going on, but teach them a new way of living, if it doesn't include a more long-term engagement, you're at high risk that you're going to get a little ray of sunshine, a little hope, and things are going to turn out bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Great advice, Doug. Thanks for being here with me today.
Thank you for the
And
opportunity.
yeah, looking forward to seeing you again soon. I'll have to come out and pay you a visit out in Arizona.
Sounds great, Daryl. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to When God Intervenes. If you found today's episode helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Your feedback helps us reach more families in need of hope and healing. For more resources and support, visit our website at thefamilyrecoverycoach.com. Until next time, stay strong and keep the faith.